Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning study. And we're continuing to look at the adversaries of Solomon in 1 Kings chapter 11. But before we do, let's have a word of prayer. Dear gracious Heavenly Father, we are so thankful that we can be here this morning to study together. We are thankful for the light that you have given us in this dark world of sin and suffering, Lord. We know that that light is the only thing that keeps us sane and that orients us to you. So we just ask for your Holy Spirit to speak to us, to guide and direct us in this study, in our conversation. And we ask that we can be corrected in any errors we may have, and that we can understand your truth, and that it will affect our lives. So be with us now, we pray, in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so yesterday in looking at these adversaries, and we'd started looking at them, and we have this connection with the prophetic periods for Hadad and Rezon. So the connection that we had with Hadad had to do with his name. So it's also Adad and Hadad. So that is, that name has different spellings that changes over time. And it's kind of interesting. Now, the Hebrew number itself, 1908, I don't have anything to connect that. But when we look at and so Hadad is He, Dalet, Dalet. Those are, He is the Ha part of the Dad, Hadad, or Hadad. But it's also H111, Adad, which we understand that symbol of 111. Well, we started in Kings on January 11th. We started studying Solomon in the book of Kings, Kings chapter 1, verse 1. So that's 111. And in this chapter itself is 11 verse, 1 is the beginning of this chapter. So it has some connection there to the January 11th symbol. And then that number is also connected. So when we look at the number 1111, it's with an aleph instead of a he. So it's Adad. So it just doesn't have the aspiration at the beginning, the ha, the wind, it's just Adad. So over time, the pronunciations of words change, right? People, we can see that with the English, you don't pronounce their R's and things like that. There's lots of interesting things. Now, there's also this other name, Hadad, and that puts a het, which is just the letter that gives you that guttural sound at the beginning of the word. Now we have 2301, but that comes from 2300. So the fact that we have this connection to the 2300 days and to January 11th as a symbol, my suggestion is that the adversaries of Solomon's apostasy, because these are adversaries to Solomon, but it's adversaries to his apostasy. Could this be, the suggestion was, could this be representing the foundation of Adventism that is in opposition to, it's been given as an adversary to the apostasy within Adventism, I guess is the way to put it. Does that seem reasonable?
I think it could be. I was trying to follow through on a lot of these, what to do with his name and then his origin, and I thought, well, Ephrathite is like Ephraimite, right?
Yeah.
And then I was thinking of Ruth 4:11 and 1 Samuel 1:1, Genesis 35:16, with Rachel dying in childbirth and bringing forth the son of sorrow and the son of my right hand, or there are other meanings for that. And then Ephrathah, which is Bethlehem, or Ephrata, which is Bethlehem. So I was just trying to tie all this to the story, and then I'm thinking Matthew 2:6 I think I said Genesis 25:19, right? So I mean, this could be a study in itself.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I gather from all of that is that we end up being tied to the prophetic periods, right? Like all of these things are allusions connected to the prophetic periods. Would you agree with that?
Well, of course.
Yeah. And so this is so if we think about the Adventist Church as apostasy, the adversaries that really are against, and we're looking at this apostasy is this compromise in 1919, right? So that's how we placed it. Now, the compromise, of course, starts earlier. It comes with the rejection of the first and second angel's messages,
Yes.
and the third angel's message in 1888. And we can see that is the adversary to the apostasy within Adventism. Now, when I came into the Adventist Church, the issue really was righteousness by faith. It was all about what happened in 1888, the nature of Christ, and all of these different things. I read M.L. Andreessen's book, Letters to the Churches, early on. Was reading the Standish brothers' work, so and the other guy, what's his name? I can't think of it. But a bunch of things, and obviously, Hope International's Our Firm Foundation magazine, things like that. And so, in all of that, there was not the great emphasis upon prophecy. There was sort of this, obviously a defense of the 2300 days and the sanctuary message. But it was, I would think, compared to what we have uncovered in understanding Millerite history, it was a fairly weak defense. That is, the focus was upon which direction the church had gone, but there wasn't really the antidote. And the problem with righteousness by faith that I later came to understand was you can talk about the theory of righteousness by faith without having faith. And the thing is, where does faith come from? And prophecy, we have a more sure word of prophecy, right? That understanding prophecy, which our church was built upon, its foundation was prophecy, is really the adversary to this apostasy of Solomon's that we see within Adventism. So that's the way that I've come to understand it, that emphasis upon prophecy was not something that was part of my preaching, for 30 some years, until I got into this movement, right? So, I was baptized, I guess, in 1982, got into this movement in 2010. So that's, 28 years, I guess. Yeah, so it was, which is kind of interesting because the first time I ever did a sermon about this message was on December 25th, 2010. So that was, I guess, 28 years to the day after I was baptized, right? 82 to 2010, yeah. 28 years. So, yeah, so the emphasis upon prophecy, understanding how the prophetic periods are, and those are the things that have been attacked, right? So those are the things that have been attacked within Adventism. And it's been done in a subtle way because an open, full frontal assault against the prophetic periods, when that was tried by Desmond Ford, didn't really go over too well, right? They had to back off. They had to, look at their strategies again. The church was not ready to hear a rejection of the prophetic periods, even though the church had rejected them, and many of our scholars had rejected them, and our institutions had rejected them. That they had accepted Desmond Ford's idea, except that they felt he was moving too fast. That's the pastor who baptized me. That's what he said. He said Desmond Ford was correct. It's just he moved too fast for the church. Right.
Well, why did he explain why he thought Desmond Ford was right?
Yeah, well, he didn't believe in the prophetic periods.
I would ask him, why are you in this church?
Well,
I mean, I probably know why, but Why? I'd like to catch them up,
Yeah.
or catch them out, as the Brits would say.
What is their social? It's their social club. They want to still be a part of it.
No, I lived with somebody like that. But
Dwight, do you have a comment?
Yeah. The comment that I've heard, and this came from an Adventist pastor that had accepted Ford's logic, was that the Hebrew did not support prophetic periods. It only supported literal time. And it always came as a shock to me, because this in Daniel was chosen by a man that was a very careful writer. And I'm speaking of Daniel, not of anybody current.
Mm-hmm.
But Ford, Cottrell, and all of those in the 1940s had this belief that the Hebrew in Daniel 8 was not prophetic in any manner.
Yeah, and
Okay, that is from the evangelicals, because that's what I had a bit of an argument with somebody about that.
Yeah.
Back in Silver Creek, and he kept denying that, the year for day, day for year kind of thing. And I said, well, look at Ezekiel 4:6, etc. And then he didn't say anymore, because he realized, yes, that's correct, but I don't want to back down on my doctrine. So we let it go at that. I said, I'm not going to push this. I am not pushing this, but I will always remain a Seventh-day Adventist,
Okay. Yeah. So you brought up a point which I'm going to get to, and that's going to be with Ezekiel 4:6. So we'll. So anyway, we look at Hadad as the 2300. So that 2300 days is an adversary that comes in when he hears that David and Joab are dead, right? So he's going to return from Egypt. And
yeah, unfortunately, I'm on my phone. I can't see, and then I don't have my e-sword, because my computer's on the electrical system here is acting crazy.
Oh, okay. But anyway, you can see that if we understand at the end of the 2300 days that there is this adversary to apostasy. That is, the 2300 days is, these adversaries are good in the context of how we're interpreting them, right? Because Solomon's in apostasy, the Adventist church is in apostasy. And so these adversaries are meant to correct the apostasy. Then we have Rezon, which is, the same as reason, right? It's a Syrian name, means a prince. And so it's going to represent, I believe, the 2520, in that it's going to be about that 65-year prophecy. Now, the thing is that the 2520 ends up being rejected openly, in a sense. So, but it's not open in the sense that the church makes some official stand against the 2520 at any point in Adventist history, right? We have some articles. Uriah Smith wrote an article, and then he wrote, a footnote. But there was no major discussions about the 2520 in any of Adventist literature. The only thing we have is Hiram Edson's proposal that we have the 2520 for the Northern Kingdom as ending in 1798 as the best application of it. Now we understand that both are correct. So here we have this adversary. Now it says that he was an adversary to Israel all the days of Solomon, beside the mischief that Hadad did, and he abhorred Israel and reigned over Syria. So one of the things we have to establish is that they're there from the beginning of Solomon's reign as adversaries, right? So you have the 2300 days, the 2520, they're adversaries. But Jeroboam, he's going to become an adversary at the end, right? So the way that I've tried to understand this story at first is, well, they're going to mention these adversaries. And so my initial reading of it would say, well, these are adversaries after all of these things have happened. But Jeroboam is going to be the only one that's after. So even though Solomon wasn't in apostasy, these adversaries still existed, right? Prior to him, building the temple, prior to him building his house. So it's not at the end of the 24 years, the 24th year of Solomon's reign, that these adversaries come in. They're there from the beginning. And we can see that if these adversaries are representing the prophetic periods, those prophetic periods are there. Now, with Jeroboam, we have a connection with Jeroboam, but he connects to Ezekiel chapter 4, right? Because it's the prophecy of Josiah when Jeroboam is there on the 18th day or the 15th day of the 8th month, offering at the altar in Bethel, that the prophet is going to come and talk about this Josiah, who's going to come and burn dead men's bones upon this altar. He's also going to, restrain his hand, right? He's going to have his hand become paralyzed in some way. So if we're going to look at Jeroboam as representing the 390, would this not symbolize the work that we have done in connection with, because what I'm trying to understand is, how do we connect this then to the end? So the 390, obviously, the day for a year principle. So we could say it's something that's always been there, like the other prophetic periods. But we have had an insight into Millerite history and the chronology of the Bible through this understanding of Leviticus 26. And Ezekiel chapter 4, 5, and 6 actually are referencing Leviticus 26, which I did a chart on that, the words that are in Leviticus 26, the phrases that are then repeated in those chapters. So the key, if we want to say that, the key that in our time unlocks this rebuke, however you want to call it, of the Adventist church apostasy has to do with the prophetic periods. Now, specifically, we have come to understand, because of Ezekiel, July 18, 2020. Now, so I know it's rather involved. There's lots of different details. But what I've tried to figure out is, how do we look at this division that happens in the kingdom? So Jeroboam is then representing a good thing, right? It's an adversary to Solomon, to his apostasy. And then we see that Rehoboam is going to, when Solomon dies, he becomes the king. But Jeroboam is going to challenge that, and he's going to get the 10 northern tribes. And so we would normally look at this story as division of the kingdom in sort of a negative sense, right? The kingdom was divided. And then you look at the joining of the two sticks and all of these things regarding this. So can we take Jeroboam as a positive thing, I guess, in the end of time, in that we have Rehoboam represents the Seventh-day Adventist church, and Jeroboam represents the understanding of the foundation of the prophetic periods. Now, the problem, of course, is we know that Jeroboam, he's going to be offering, at the altar in Bethel, where the golden calf is in Bethel, as this counterfeit. So how do we reconcile that? Do we just reconcile the fact that he's this adversary as one aspect, but not carry that through with the division of the kingdom? You understand the problem that I'm facing in this interpretation.
Yes, I can see it. Well, it's an ironic thing, just like with Samson.
Yeah. So in making an application from history, we have examples of this: Vashti and Esther, Samson, who's a type of Christ. So sometimes history is interpreted in a sense, kind of parallel, but a parallel mirror, right? So I don't know how far we carry that, because once we get to Jeroboam and we get the division of the kingdom, well, I don't know if we would continue on and looking at it that way. But we could definitely see that Jeroboam as a symbol connects to the 390 and to Ezekiel, and Ezekiel connects to July 18th. And so we would have to say that there's this division of Rehoboam. Now, Rehoboam's not a good figure either, right?
No.
But Jeroboam is given these 10 tribes from God. Now, he is given an admonition that he has to obey God, and of course he doesn't. But, we can also look at within our movement that has happened as well. So one of the things that I guess is the most troubling about our movement is the direction it has gone, right? So the movement has moved away from its initial message to all kinds of fractured ideas, I guess is the best way to look at it. We have all different kinds of voices that are aligned somewhat with what Jeff began, but it's just a bunch of offshoots. It's very similar to what happened after 1844 with all the different groups, that you could trace back to Adventism. We have the same type of thing in our history. And the approach that we've taken in that is that we believe that we need to study. We don't believe we have all of the answers. We're not asking people to follow us. We're not saying we're the true movement that you have to follow. We just believe that the study of these things, that people can make their own decisions. So we're not organizing some ministry that's taking in money and promoting itself in some way, and we're doing in the sense of what we're doing, how we present our videos and everything is it's not done in a way that's promoting, right? And I keep thinking about, well, should we be promoting the message in some other way? And so far, God has just told me, continue doing this, right? So we keep doing our videos. We do, I write papers and put them on academia, and that He will take care of that. As much as, I feel helpless.
I know, I can sense your weariness.
Oh, sorry.
No, don't. When Ellen White's talking about the 144,000, she says how weary and haggard they were, and I'm thinking, yeah, and we're supposed to have the joy of the Lord. The joy of the Lord doesn't even have to be a feeling. Like, this is what I'm learning more and more. It's just that assurance in Christ. Yeah,
definitely the assurance is there, but the self-doubt is the thing that wears upon me. Am I doing enough?
We can never do enough, because we cannot repay what Christ has done for us.
Yeah, but you understand what I'm saying. It's like, should I take some different actions? And from what I can see, from what God's showing us in our study, is that no, we don't take different actions. We do the thing that we're doing. But I'm also a patient guy, but I would like to see this history of this world wrap up. I'd like to see a resolution to all the dissonance of the chord, to use a musical metaphor. We keep ending up with a bunch of deceptive cadences. If you understand what a deceptive cadence is, it's where you think that something's going to resolve. It's going to resolve, but it doesn't, right? It ends up in, instead of going to the 1 chord, it goes to the 6th chord. For anybody who knows music theory. So we end up having that happen. It's sort of like a false summit. You could think of it if you're climbing like a pass or something like that.
That I can relate to.
Yeah, we've experienced lots of false summits. So you want to get to the summit, and you think it's just over this next hill, and you get to that hill, and then you realize, no, you got a long way to go. So this is the situation that we're in. But when it comes to this to understanding the role that this movement has had, I would say that Jeroboam as a symbol represents the light that has come in this connection with the prophecy of Josiah. So maybe what we would say is, these symbolize these prophecies on this level as adversaries. But once we get into Jeroboam and Rehoboam, we're not going to continue that analogy along the way, right? We're not going to be following the king of the north, the northern kingdom, as being the good kingdom and the king of the south as being the bad kingdom, right? It's the prophecy will change in how we understand it, how we're making these applications. That is, there are different stories. But here in this story, the adversaries are these different prophetic periods, and Jeroboam is the prophetic period that comes at the time of the end in 1989, in that it's a repeat of Millerite history. And so that's tied with just the symbol of Jeroboam and the 390 years. So it ties to all of the light that has come at the end. So we had the 2300 and the 2520. They will always have been there. Now, we could say, well, the 2520 was hidden, but it's on the 1863 chart standing as a witness. It's there in the week of Christ study. It's there in the 70 weeks. It's not being noticed, but it's still there as an adversary. And the understanding of the 2520 opens up the understanding of Ezekiel. And of course, the connection between Daniel and Ezekiel is often not seen. They're both what we would classify as apocalyptic literature. They both are addressing the end of the Babylonian captivity in some ways. Daniel more so, but Ezekiel as well. But he's in the midst of that captivity, just as Daniel is. So I know that's a lot of connections. For somebody who hasn't really studied into what we're doing, they're not going to know what we're talking about. But that day for a year that we have in the attack, and I always think it's providential, that I was converted, on August 11th during the Glacier View meetings. I wasn't there in Glacier View. I was in 100 Mile House, but didn't know about Glacier until long after Glacier View. But, it's at that extremely, it's a pivotal point in Adventist history. And what was being attacked at that time was the prophetic periods. Like often the way that it's characterized within conservative Adventism is all about the nature of Christ and things like that, right? Most people don't really emphasize like the understanding of the sanctuary and the investigative judgment and so forth. But really the main attack is the prophetic periods themselves. And because once you attack the prophetic periods, the whole structure crumbles, right? It collapses. And that's the thing that if you don't have the prophetic periods, you don't have the other things. They don't have any context. So I'm kind of tied up in that history and in understanding the day for a year. So the arguments that were made by Desmond Ford and others, Cottrell and so forth, against the prophetic periods are really utter nonsense, right? And I've read
an agenda, obviously.
Yeah, well, their agenda was to align with the evangelicals, but you can see how far Adventism has departed, where what we understand in looking at not just Ezekiel, but we look at Ezra 7-10, and we look at the journey from Babylon to Jerusalem and the chiastic structures that are there. These things should have been noticed by our scholars, right? They should have been digging for these things. Now, there were some people who were trying to do some digging, like Grace Amadon. She looked at the chronology of 457 BC. She looked at the chronology of when Jesus was crucified, right? She looked at the chronology of 1844 and tried to determine the calendar. But her work was not well accepted, not just, that the secular, because her articles were published in, major biblical journals, but it wasn't really accepted. And the same within Adventism. She didn't become a champion of nobody would know about her, basically. One is she was a woman, which was a strike against her in
So was Ellen White, and there was a strike against her too.
Yeah. And then the other thing was she was teaching something that was not really welcome. So the church didn't really want the prophetic periods to survive.
Well, because it was an indictment of themselves.
Yeah, and one of the things I don't see is that, in the dismissing of the chronology, we don't see them addressing Grace Amidon's work as, and refuting it in any way. They just ignored it.
Right? This is the thing. Even when I haven't been inside an SDA church building for about 6 years, but I noticed the trend there. Before that, you're not even talking about what's really important. Thank God that the small group that I was with when I came into the church were encouraging me to read the Spirit of Prophecy. Had I not done that, I would have just, this is another club. Okay, let's see what other church, because I had been to Mennonite, Pentecostal, you name it, a whole lot of different churches off and on prior to that, when I came out of another major cult, which didn't call itself a church, but with this quasi-Christian antinomian. It was horrible. When I saw what was, I thought, no, this isn't the answer either. Like, where is it, Lord? Where is it? And he did tell me to go into the SDA to start. And I called him up and I said, I'd like to have Bible studies, because I think I know I've been taught a lot of error in the group that I just left. And then when these gals got a hold of me, I'm so glad that they did, because they were genuine SDAs.
Yeah. Yeah. So so we definitely have these parallel kingdoms, within Adventism. So how we're going to try to address that with the Jeroboam and Rehoboam, the northern and southern kingdom. Maybe there's just some symbolism in there. So you're saying, Kelly's saying that they're at Glacier View, that Margaret Davis and her husband were at the time it happened. Okay, interesting. And Kelly,
I'll just read that there.
Yeah.
Margaret Davis was at Glacier Bay with her husband Tom Davis.
You mean Glacier View?
Glacier View. Sorry, thank you. Being Canadian there, Glacier Bay. He was editor of the Review at the time. He was editor of a lot of magazines. So that's one of the reasons they were there, or she was there with her husband. So Margaret was the only woman there as well, and she was also the only one to stand up and leave Ford speechless. He couldn't answer her question.
I wish I'd seen that.
I do have a recording of her telling me that story somewhere. Same time when I took that picture. Both Peter Plum and I were there when she was sharing that story. I'd get her to share it over and over, and one time I finally recorded it.
Thank God.
Yeah. So, if I was at Glacier View, not that I'm some great scholar, but there would be lots of questions that you could ask, lots of things you could bring up that would make them recognize that, what Ford was doing was incorrect. Now, they did remove his credentials, but many of the people still had sympathies with Ford. The problem that I've heard from many was that Ford was just moving too fast. And they felt that, his moving too fast was going to basically derail their reforms, right? So by removing his credentials, they could still continue behind the scenes undermining the prophetic periods.
Yes.
Like Loma Linda.
Okay, Jeff, what did you say?
I just said Loma Linda honors him, practically worships him.
Yeah, yeah. No, I know. So, Desmond Ford, now he passed away a couple of years ago, but yeah, he definitely was a good speaker, but he didn't speak truth. And there's a lot of people like that.
That's the problem.
So is Satan.
Yeah. Dwight Nelson is one of the most deceptive speakers in Adventism that a lot of people like, which I have no idea why, but they do.
Oh, yeah, he's quite the actor. I've listened to some of his speeches, and mainly I was watching his body language, the way he spoke, and I thought, oh, just like the Jesuits. Huh? Pardon me, but it's true.
Well, he speaks like a United Church minister.
Oh, well, haven't had much contact with the United Church.
Yeah.
Well, he's the one I can't. He's the one that had a Revelation seminar when I come into the church.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, as I said before, and I said it to Jeff and Kathy and other people who were there, she laughed. Jeff sure didn't. I don't think he liked me. God can even use Balaam's ass. I don't care who's speaking these messages.
Yeah.
Just want to concentrate on the message.
As long as it's truth. Yeah. So
as long as it's truth.
Yeah, so Kelly put a link there to the video of Desmond Ford sharing his belief, and he deals with that's Loma Linda speech, which we've all seen, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, so the idea that scholars familiar with Hebrew and Greek confirm that an investigative judgment or the 1844 date cannot be proven from Daniel 8:14. Well, it's kind of
I would wonder if everyone has seen it, but it's sure in that 3 minutes a person can see who he is, especially the mocking of Billy Miller and so on.
Yeah. We all watched it. I'm pretty sure.
Don't speak for all of us. Let's take a vote. Well, who's seen this? One, I have. Theodore, yeah.
I have.
Anyone
I don't
else?
think I've seen it. I have no recollection of seeing it. I don't know.
I haven't seen it.
Miller. Oh, Billy Miller. You mean William Miller?
No. The video and the link is for. Yeah, he calls him Billy Miller.
Yeah.
I
this was. I know that we shared this video in these studies.
Well, I forget what we studied last week.
We watched it. Yeah, but we watched the video in these studies. So
I don't think I watched it.
I didn't either.
Okay.
I don't think I did. No, I don't think I watched it.
Okay. Well, we watched it together. You just don't remember. So people, you can click on the link and watch it. Maybe it'll trigger your memory. But this is the clip.
Yeah, I do remember watching it. I think I was the one who shared it, maybe, or was it you?
It was me.
I might have had and didn't realize I watched it.
Yeah, when you see it, you will remember. You will remember. Yeah. Well, we've watched it a few times, so. But
anyway, speaker of Loma, was he at Loma Linda when he was?
Yeah, he was speaking at Loma Linda. Yeah.
I think I saw parts of that.
Yeah. It was shown extensively within this movement, and we actually watched it again a couple of times. So, but the point is that we have this sort of assertion that the Hebrew and Greek do not support the investigative judgment or the 1844 date, which is such a silly argument, because one is you can say that, but you have to look at all of the scriptures. It's not just Daniel 8:14, right? You got so many other things, but this sort of attacking something in this manner without a comprehensive attack. Now, there are people who have done comprehensive attacks against the
Just a sec there. The silliness of that argument could almost even be by design, because a lot of outrageous things are said today that we live in, and people don't really look into it? How many people have studied out Ford's assertions and the other side of things and so on? I mean, people just take the word of authorities or people they respect.
Yeah. So you say, these scholars said this as if that's an argument. It's not an argument. It's a logical fallacy. You can't even appeal to the majority of scholars as just because scholars think something that it means it's true. And I can tell you quite plainly that the arguments they use to try to tear down the Hebrew and Greek are silly arguments. They're not even good arguments, right? They frame it in such a way that, if you believe all of their assumptions, then yes, but the assumptions are never examined. And so there's so many questions that they never address. They try to argue that, for instance, the day for a year principle doesn't apply in Ezra or in Ezekiel chapter 4,
Yeah, heard that one.
because they don't even understand the prophecy. They can't tell you when the prophecy ends and starts. They don't know in the 40 years what period it's referring to at all. So how can they make any comments about whether it applies for a day for a year, right? So, this is the problem. So we have, in our studies, gone back and looked at the foundation of Adventism, and we see that the foundation was laid correctly. Now, in relating to Solomon, so remember when we go back and we looked at Solomon, that he connects to that 20 years, the 7 and the 13, connects to the decrees, right? So the 7th year of Artaxerxes, the 28th year of Artaxerxes, so the 7 and the 13 years. Obviously, the building of the temple, the dedication of the temple connects to the temple in its dedication in 515, right? That's going to be 490 years and 5 months between the two dedications. And then you have the 20 years between the first and second decree also tying you to that 20 years, right? So we have all of these ties of Solomon to the prophetic periods. But then Solomon, he's going to marry strange women, right? So the Adventist church marries a bunch of strange women. That's all of these other churches. Now, that happens progressively, right? Solomon doesn't marry all the women all at once. He starts first with this princess of Egypt who he converts. And his thinking is very similar to the thinking of the Adventist church. We want to win over the evangelicals. How are we going to do that? We're going to change how we express some of our ideas. We're going to adopt their methodology. We're going to learn in their schools and influence them, not realizing that they themselves are the ones that are influenced, that the evangelicals end up converting them. And they think if they hold on to sort of some of the forms of Adventism, that those, what they call truths, the two basic truths that Adventists now believe that their purpose is, that it's important to rest one day in 7 and that God is being judged. Those are the watered down versions of the sanctuary message and the Sabbath. So we can see that approach of Solomon, the approach of the church, is a deceptive snare. Now, these adversaries then being the prophetic periods, so we would say the 2300 days, the 2520, and the 390 years of Ezekiel that tie us to, ultimately, and our history is going to be expressed with the connection with Revelation 9 and then July 18, right? So these adversaries then undo this apostasy. So one of the things, often we focus upon the apostasy. So we can see what Desmond Ford is doing. We can see what the church has done. But for many people who watch, what Ford has done or know the apostasy in the church, they have no better, they have no remedy to the situation. They're in some ways, their cure is worse than the disease, right? Because it goes into different types of fanaticism and and nonsense, right? All kinds of foundational beliefs of Adventism are cast aside, so you could look at all these winds of doctrine, all of these groups that believe the church is in apostasy, whether it's, lunar Sabbatarians or feast keepers or character of God, whatever it is, they have provided nothing better. And these are all counterfeits. So then we have our movement, which also is fractured into all these different groups. And we recognize that the foundation of Adventism has been laid correctly, but we don't just go back to the foundation and stay there, which some groups do. They want to go back to becoming Millerites. We recognize that the truth has unfolded, that there are things that we understand more fully in these last days, especially in the unsealing of the seven thunders. So we have a perspective that is the cure to the problem within Adventism. But then the real problem, well, for me personally, is how does that message come to Adventism? And that's something that we're studying, that we're trying to understand in these studies. So as we've zoomed out, we now are looking at the Adventist church rather than at the autopsy of the movement itself. Yeah, Jeff, you had a comment?
Well, those are only open for it will receive it.
Well, I'm thinking of Christ, when he soon gave up trying to convert, as it were, the elders, the Sanhedrin, the scholars of his day. Some of them came to him, and some of them did receive him. If you read in the book of Acts, many of the priests were converted to the faith.
Yeah.
So they'll come to us, the ones who are really hungry and seeking.
Mm-hmm. Yes. We can trust in God's providence that if we are doing the work that he asks us to do, that work will be accomplished. But, you understand, of course, the natural human desire to see the work finished and, to actually be more active. But at this point,
I felt that for years. One of the biggest battles I had when I joined this movement was no public evangelism. And I thought, well, I'm still going to continue with private evangelism.
Yeah, well, that was misunderstood by people, right? So the idea of no public evangelism was not bringing a bunch of people, actively to become, baptized members of something, right? But no way did that ever imply that we should not evangelize on a private way.
Plant seed.
Yeah. We weren't going to be harvesting fields. We were going to be planting seeds, right?
Do you remember
I need to ask a question. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kelly.
Remember your question. Theodore, do you remember me standing up to challenge Jeff, was it at Wabaman, about evangelism?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I remember.
Because at that time, he seemed to be saying nothing, and I had to strive with him. I'm going to share books. I'm going to talk to people about God. I'm not going to stop that. Well, and he finally conceded the point, but at that time, it was almost like no evangelism. So people did misunderstand it, though. You're right.
Yeah. Okay, William.
William, your question?
Oh yeah, I was going to just ask, would it be wrong for me to go to they put on festivals and stuff, and put up a booth and give out books and stuff? Is that what you call public evangelism?
No.
I would call it that. Well, to some extent it is. I mean, you're going to get in trouble with the SDAs mainly.
The concept had to do with public evangelism, bringing them into the movement, bringing them into the church as baptized members. That was because it would not have been profitable at that time, and that's the main reason. And we were not ready.
Well, I don't think it would be anything wrong for me to do that, would it?
No, of course not.
I would have
I'd help you set up the booth and hand them out.
But we actually are not in the time of no public evangelism now. That applied to then. It doesn't apply to now. But even then, that wouldn't have been against the idea of no public evangelism. But I've never been a public evangelist. That is, I've never had a desire to bring people into Adventism. I've always been a seed planter. So for me, it's pretty easy. I've only ever brought one person into the church, if you don't count.
Well, I don't want to bring. I mean, even people who still were attending tithe paying and everything. Some of them were commenting. I wouldn't want to bring them into the corporate church.
Yeah. So I've never had that desire to bring people into the corporate church. I've done lots of Bible studies, ministered to lots of people, but I didn't seek to make them Seventh-day Adventists.
Yeah, I still warn them about that. In fact, I warn them about all the churches, but I say particularly the Seventh-day Adventist church. I said, although there are some genuine people there, they just have to have the veil taken off their eyes because it's corrupt. I said, all of the churches are really corrupt. Find God for yourself and study His Word.
Yeah.
So if you want me to study with you, I'll be glad to. I'm learning too.
Yeah. So obviously, we would all agree that the church is not where we want to bring people, but we still have a work to do for the individual, right? And we bring people to Christ. Now, if somebody decides to become a Seventh-day Adventist, that's their choice.
Right.
But seeking to bring people into the church, it's just not something I've ever had a desire to do.
Like seek and bring them into the message.
Right.
More it's just to bring them to understand how to study, to talk to God, to know God themselves personally, to have a personal relationship with God, and to study the truth. I teach the doctrines of Adventism, right, because I believe them to be true, but I never promote the church, the organization, to people.
You can develop study groups too,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that's what I've done. I've done lots of study groups. But you see, the point is some people, their goal is to bring people into the Adventist church. They search sea and land to find one proselyte and make him twofold a child of hell than they themselves are, right? They think that that's going to save a person. But if that person is never truly converted and they just become a social Adventist, you've done worse to them than if you had left them alone, right? And to me, that's just such a simple idea that a person needs to be converted first, getting them baptized, getting them to join a church, getting them to even just attend church and not be truly converted. You've not done them a benefit. You've done them a disservice because they now can think that they're okay, that they're a Christian. But it's not well understood within Adventism. And there's a lot of lip service about bringing people to Christ that really is just a guise for bringing people into a social group, right? So the social,
where they can be controlled.
Yeah, and so back in the 90s.
I've seen a couple ends of that spectrum in the church, like numbers, quick baptisms from large public evangelistic series.
Yes.
And then I've seen, Randy Barber, Calgary Central. He had pastors Sabbath school class for usually at least a year before he baptized the people that were coming they first came to the public evangelism. Then he brought them to church. They attended Sabbath for about a year, and then he baptized. But the one time at an It Is Written seminar, I brought my Hindu friend, and he really was impressed with the preacher and so on. Made an altar call, and he asked me, "Can I go?" I said, "Sure, you can go down." So he went to the front, and then they asked everybody to stay behind after and go to the back and meet with the pastors. And they were going to baptize him the next day. They told him, bring a towel and change your clothes. And I said, Randy Barber was standing next to me, and I said, they can't baptize him. He's Hindu. And Randy looked at me and he just kind of nodded his head. Oh, yeah, they will. He was not impressed either, but he didn't get baptized. I didn't bring him back.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've seen both ends of the spectrum with the church.
Yeah.
Some do it well. Warburg would be doing it well, I'm sure.
Has your friend been back since, or gotten in touch with you?
I'm sorry, what?
I just wanted to know whether your friend has been in touch with you since.
Oh, that Hindu friend?
Yeah.
Not that particular one, but I do have a lot of friends that stay in touch that are East Indian and so on. But yeah, not that fellow.
But the point here, is that often what the church is doing is just trying to get members. Mm-hmm. And of course,
Angela, just further to that is, as like Theodore, the seed was planted there for sure. And I left him with literature, but I don't know, I lost touch with him somehow. But he'll remember about Jesus, I think.
Yeah, and you don't always know what happens to that person afterwards, because I've had, going door to door and praying with people and finding out years later they became Adventists. So you just never know. But the main thing is that people start a walk with God, that they start to be aware of God and they start to know, how to study the Bible and so forth. But when we look at this situation with how the church has gone into apostasy, it has been gradual, right? They began rejecting the prophetic periods. First, the first, second, and third angels' messages are rejected. And then they have the books of a new order. And they have the form of godliness, but without the power of God. And the parallel to the Jewish nation is after they return to Jerusalem and build the second temple is, there's just such an obvious situation where they have the temple, they have the form of God, but they don't have the Shekinah glory in the temple. They don't have the Ten Commandments in the ark, right? They don't have the God's law written in their hearts. And they're exclusive, self-righteous, self-justifying. And they crucify the Son of God when he comes, right? So that parallel to the church being Jerusalem, which is much worse than Babylon, is the situation that we're in presently. The question is, what is the message that's to be given in our time? And so there's lots of voices clamoring for attention. We believe that what we have had unfolded to us is a solid message. It affirms everything we believe as a Seventh-day Adventist, the doctrines of Adventism, the foundation of Adventism. It doesn't introduce some new speculative theory or some truth that Ellen White knew nothing about, right? Which often people have, this new light that Ellen White didn't have. We're not introducing some new prophet who, is some authority that people have to listen to. We're introducing people to the scriptures individually, right? We're not introducing them to a group or an organization or a church that they join. We're introducing people to a truth. Now, first we have to go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. First we have to go to those who should be called, right? They should understand this message, but many of those will not come, right? Their minds are blinded. They have prejudices. They won't even look at the information. But we still have to go to them first, because there will be some of them, and some of them, I would say, what we would normally call great men, who will see this light and be very powerful voices for this message. But we have to be patient, right? We can't go ahead on our own trying to accomplish a work that only can be accomplished by the work of the Holy Spirit. So it can be discouraging looking at the situation in the church. It can be discouraging looking at the situation in the world. It can be discouraging, how few we are and how divided the movement has become. but we believe that God, in his providence, will unfold these things. So the story of Jeroboam, let's read some of this here again. So we have read these verses, but I want to look at Jeroboam in a bit more detail. So it says, and Jeroboam the son of Nebat, an Ephrathite. So the idea of an Ephrathite, an inhabitant or descendant of Ephraim, an inhabitant of Bethlehem. Bethlehem Ephratah, though thou be among the thousands of Judah, out of thee shall come forth he that is to be ruler in Israel, whose goings forth have been from everlasting, right? From the days of eternity, however you look at it, right? That's the verse. So,
yep.
So,
Matthew 2:6,
yeah.
I think it is.
Yeah. So this
Then
is Jeroboam.
Elkanah too. So it's this priesthood.
Okay. Yeah. Now he's an Ephrathite of Zeradah, which is the Hebrew number is 6868. Now, what would be the significance of that number? Anybody have any insight into that?
Well, we know it's a doubling, but
Yeah. So there's a doubling there.
H68.
What is H68?
Yeah, H68. Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't have
so a doubling of it. Okay, so if we take that it's 6/8 and it's a doubled, well, I know it's going to start with an aleph. Eben, a stone. Okay.
Okay, Ebenezer.
Yeah. A stone. Okay, so it's a doubling of a stone. Well, when you start stacking stones on each other, aren't they kind of like foundations?
Yeah, a pillar.
And start building things, stack them. Their building process.
Yeah, so Jeroboam the son of Nebat, an Ephrathite of Zeradah, Solomon's servant, whose mother's name was Zeruiah, a widow woman, even he lifted up his hand against the king. And this is the cause that he lifted up his hand against the king. So Solomon's going to build Milo and repair the breaches of the city of David, his father. So what is it that Solomon is rebuilding that Jeroboam is upset about? I don't fully understand this at this point.
I thought that Pharaoh was involved with Milo or Milo too.
Okay.
I'm just saying I don't know really.
Yeah, I know. Well, we're going to look into it. Let me see. Some commentaries might point us to some verses. It says here he was fortified in Solomon's 24th and 25th year. So Jeroboam's going to be on the scene at that time, according to Albert Barnes. So it says Jameson Fawcett Brown say this was an internal enemy of a still more formidable character. He was a young man of talent and energy who, having been appointed by Solomon superintendent of the engineering works projected around Jerusalem, had risen into public notice. And on being informed by a very significant act of the prophet Ahijah of the royal destiny, which by divine appointment awaited him, his mind took a new turn. Okay, and that doesn't really help us. That just...
No, it helps me to understand certain things.
I just don't know why it says, and this was the cause that lifted up his hand against the king. Cause, the word is the word cause, so it's just the bar. So the fact that Solomon was rebuilding or repairing this city, and he's repairing the breaches, 6556. Oh, repaired the breaches of the city of David. So he's gonna build Milo and repair Jerusalem, the breaches of Jerusalem. So I'm not really sure, trying to understand what Jeroboam's concern is. Maybe what's happening here, let me try to understand this. So it might be just the translation isn't really helping us. Because it says in verse 28, the man Jeroboam was a mighty man of valor, and Solomon, seeing the young man that he was industrious, he made him ruler over the charge of the house of Joseph. So what it seems like to me, it's that he is involved in the buildings of the city of Milo and in repairing the breaches of Jerusalem. And because he has done that, Solomon promotes him. That maybe makes more sense to me. So Solomon is going to promote Jeroboam, and that ends up being the reason that he turns against Solomon, because when that happens, it came to pass at that time, when Jeroboam went out of Jerusalem, that the prophet Ahijah, the Shilonite, found him in the way, and he had clad himself with a new garment, and they two were alone in the field. And Ahijah caught the new garment that was on him and rent it in 12 pieces. So I guess Jeroboam has a new garment, right? Ahijah comes along, takes his garment and rips it into 12 pieces. That's kind of nice of him. He said to Jeroboam, take thee 10 pieces, for thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, behold, I will rend the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon, and will give 10 tribes to thee. Now, of course, it's not always clear who has the new garment on, but I assume it's Jeroboam, because it says he caught the new garment that was on him. That would mean 8:6:10. To manipulate, that is to seize. So he's not going to seize as a garment that's on himself. He would be seizing the garment from Jeroboam. But he shall have one tribe for my servant David's sake. Now we notice that in this story, there's this repetition. And when you think about the labor involved in writing these documents, why do they repeat this same thing again and again? So he's going to have the prophet Ahijah come. He's going to take this garment off of Jeroboam, and he says, I'll rend the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon. I will give 10 tribes to thee. But he shall have one tribe for my servant David's sake, and for Jerusalem's sake, in the city which I have chosen, out of all the tribes of Israel. He's going to go and explain why that is. And then he says in verse 34, howbeit I will not take the whole kingdom out of his hand, but I will make him prince all the days of his life for David, my servant's sake, whom I chose, because he kept my commandments and my statutes, and I will take the kingdom out of his son's hand, and I will give it unto thee, even 10 tribes. So it repeats that. Okay. And unto David I will give one tribe, that David my servant may have a light always before me in Jerusalem, the city which I have chosen me to put my name there. And I will take thee, and thou shalt reign according to all that thy soul desireth, and shall be king over all Israel. Okay, and then it says, basically, you have to be faithful. You have to keep the commandments, to do the statutes, do what is right in my sight, keep the statutes and my commandments, as David my servant did, that I will be with thee, and build thee a sure house as I built it for David, and will give Israel unto thee. Okay. So we have this repetition of this. And then it says, Solomon sought therefore to kill Jeroboam. And Jeroboam arose and fled into Egypt unto Shishak, king of Egypt, and was in Egypt until the death of Solomon. And the rest of the acts of Solomon, and all that he did, and his wisdom, are they not written in the book of the acts of Solomon? Right. So we got Jeroboam. He's going to flee to Egypt. So would this be referring to some time in which the message of Jeroboam has arisen until the death of Solomon? He's going to flee, right? So Jeroboam, you understand what I'm saying there? So we're saying that Jeroboam is this particular message, but that particular message, even though he's an adversary, he's not going to come into play until the end of the third angel's message. Right? So it's going to come into play at 9/11, maybe. But he arises earlier. So how would we take that as Jeroboam being this adversary? But he's not going to be opposing Solomon until the end. But he has arisen earlier. You understand the question?
Yeah.
Is there some way in which our message arose earlier, but was then had to flee? That is,
well,
is there?
Because it wasn't received as it should have been. Yeah, we've had to separate.
Okay. How about Louis F. Weir?
I said we should be studying his books. You know.
Yeah, yeah. So, but when we look at Louis F. Weir, yeah, yeah. So when we look at Louis F. Weir, he's going to have this message about the time of the end, though he's not quite understanding that it is the time of the end. But he understands Daniel 11 verse 40b. He's going to be maligned, right? And they're going to take away his ministerial credentials. But he arises at the time of the end, November 9th, 1989. And he arises because Hans K. Larondel republishes his books. Does anybody know who that guy is and why he republished Louis F. Weir's books?
I've heard the name. I've read something by him, but it's been so long.
Yeah. So
I
would
remember
consider
the name. What was it?
Yeah. So he would be a liberal scholar, but he's going to republish Louis F. Weir's books as a fight against dispensationalism. So he doesn't fully understand, I don't think, the implications of what Louis F. Weir was saying. But Larondel was opposing dispensationalists, and he saw Louis F. Weir's books as a good way to fight that. So in the 1980s, he is republishing these books. And because he's republishing them, I'm able to get copies of them, which I probably would never have seen otherwise. So I'm reading Louis F. Weir, reading about what he's saying about prophecy, a lot of the stuff that we use, triple application prophecy, the use of numbers, the symbolic use of numbers is well documented by him, but also specifically the understanding of Daniel 11 verse 40. So when that occurred, the fall of the Soviet Union occurred, we now had a witness prophesying that. So I'm saying that it could be that message that Louis F. Weir presented that would be this adversary that arises at the end when Solomon dies, right? So, and we can say, well, Solomon is passed by on November 9th, right? He's also going to be passed by at 9/11, right? So those two dates go together. Does that seem okay? Yeah, the corporation is bypassed.
They're mirrors, 11/9, 9/11.
Yeah. I just did which I posted on my academia, but statistical analysis, the probability analysis of the dates. November 9th, 89, 9/11, Trump's speech at NATO, the election of the Pope, Comey's meme, Trump's.
Yeah, I tried to read that. I just got lost. I don't even understand the terminology. My brain just didn't grasp it. I mean, it will sooner or later, but I have to sit down and take time to do that.
Could you also use that in Jeff's time when he stopped speaking for that period of time and then he come back?
You use that in what way?
What was you just talking about?
Well, I was just talking about the line that we have with Comey's meme and Trump and 11/9 and 9/11 and all of the different coincidences. Just the simple ones, like, Trump is going to be 2,000 or 20,871 days old at 9/11, and he's going to be 78,000 or what? 28,710. Anyway, it's the reverse number of days at his inauguration, and just the span of time, the 8647, the date of the Pope was elected, and how you add the 7 days to that, you get the number of days from 9/11 to Trump's inauguration. Anyway, I just had AI analyze statistically the probability, and it was 6 6.06 times 10 to the power of, was it 59 or 69? Anyway, it was some crazy number.
I was thinking about Jeroboam going into Egypt, and then when Solomon died, he came back out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew you were.
Could you use that during with the time period Jeff was silent?
No.
Because Jeff didn't come back with a solid message, with a foundational message.
No. And this is dealing with the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So once again, we've zoomed out. We're no longer looking at the dates within, this applying to events within our time. We're just looking at Jeroboam as representing our whole line, right? You understand what I'm saying? It's because we're not doing an autopsy on the movement anymore.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. So it wouldn't apply to Jeff. This is applying to the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And then we would look at the message of Jeroboam as a symbol of a message, right? The character of Jeroboam is symbolizing this message, tied one to the 390, because we have Jeroboam there at the end. When we get there, we'll look at that in more detail, because that's in chapter 13. And so to me, Jeroboam would represent all of those things, all of this message that wasn't fully seen at, in 1989. We have this seed planted by Louis F. Weir. And so that message, not Louis F. Weir, but the message tied to what Louis F. Weir is talking about, Daniel 11, verse 40, we know that that is seen then as the time of the end in 1989. It connects Daniel 11, verse 40, A and B together, 1798 and 1989. And then we have that mirror with 9/11. So we can tie all of our history together as one event, right? That's the arrival of the second angel to empower the third angel. So when we're looking at this history here, we're looking at this history of Jeroboam and the end of Solomon's reign. Solomon represents something about the third angel's message, but the third angel's message that goes into apostasy. So the question is, when Jeroboam comes, because Rehoboam's going to become king, but Jeroboam's going to come along and then be given the northern tribes, and we're going to have the prophecy of Josiah, right? So the prophecy of Josiah is going to occur in chapter 13. And that is then our message, right? So we would say, is that 15th day of the 8th month in 977 BC, can we tie that on this bigger scale? Because we've tied it within our lines, but now in this bigger line of the Adventist Church, can we tie that symbol to 1989, right? Or 9/11, or just our whole message, however we're going to tie those symbols together. Because we look at 11/9 and 80, and 9/11, 11/9 and 9/11 as really the same symbol, right? Even though in our line it's differentiated. In Ellen White's line, she doesn't see all of that detail. We just have the arrival of the second angel. And so if you have the second angel, you have the first angel. So when we zoom into that arrival of the second angel, we see the first angel. But Ellen White doesn't see that per se. She just sees the one event, which to her is the Sunday law. But to us is all of this history that we've been going through. So that's what we're going to try to do tomorrow, is to dig a bit deeper into Jeroboam and understand how that represents what happened in our history. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, in Jeremiah 31, 20 and 21, I was also thinking about that. Is Ephraim my dear son? Is he a pleasant child? For since I spake against him, I do earnestly remember him still. Therefore my bowels are troubled for him. I will surely have mercy upon him, saith the Lord. Set thee up waymarks, make thee high heaps. Set thine heart toward the highway, even the way which thou wentest. Return to the old paths. Turn again, O Virgin of Israel. Turn again to these thy cities. And then as for Zeruah, meaning full-breasted woman, I thought, okay, let's go to Proverbs 5. That fits too, especially about, to be ravished by the wife of thy youth, and beware of strange women whose lips drip like the honeycomb, etc., etc., etc. Yeah, it all fits. It's just amazing.
Yeah. There's just lots of things that we're going to have to parse out of this story, but you can see, I think we're going in the right direction. That's, but yeah. So anyway, thanks everyone for the discussion today. It definitely helps, when people talk about things, right, rather than me just talking. It helps us sort through all of this information, and we sort through it together. So if there's no further comments, I can close with prayer. The dear Father in heaven, thank you for the time that we have had to study this morning. And we just pray for your continued presence through this day. Help each of us as we contemplate these things to have our faith increased. We pray that your angels can watch over our family and loved ones, and that we can have patience. Bring us together again to study these things, and we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.